Today I'm going to have coffee with Will White. Will is a composer and a conductor. He's the music director of Orchestra Seattle and the Seattle Chamber Singers. He's also one of 3 hosts of Classical Gab Fest, a podcast where they address different topics every week, and they play some listening games, and they make listening recommendations. It's a really fun show, and so I'm going to call him up and ask him some questions about it. Hi, Will. Good morning.
Greetings, Silas. Good to see you.
It's nice to meet you on Zoom. We've never met in person before, and we just recently met on Facebook, I think because a mutual friend said, you guys should talk about stuff.
That's right. Yeah, it was John Mckeever, who's been a guest on your podcast or on this, I don't know what you call this, a YouTube show, a series?
I don't know. I don't know either. I call them my coffee talks or my coffee show, or it doesn't really matter.
Well, he had been a guest, and he talked about his podcast that he does with another mutual friend, John Durand, about musical theater, of which I am also an aficionado, even though I'm a classical guy at heart.
Okay, great. Yeah, and the reason John Mckeever told me to get in touch with you is because right now I'm doing sort of a mini series on conductors who develop shows and classes and podcasts and things like that online, and you have just such a thing. You want to tell us about it just for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. My podcast is called the Classical Gab Fest. It is a weekly roundtable discussion between me and 2 good friends who also happen to be conductors, even though it's really not in any way a show about conducting. My co-hosts are Tiffany Liu and Kensho Watanabe. And our goal with the show is to explore the wide world of classical music. And we do a 3-topic show every week. It's modeled after, if you've ever listened to the Slate Gab Fest. So, slate.com, the online magazine, they have a culture Gab Fest and a political Gab Fest. They have, a money, kind of a finance Gab Fest. And the idea is that it's the same 3 hosts every week, and they take a look at 3 different subjects. So, with our show, and then we often have a guest as well. So with our show, topics that we've covered are like, all of the drama in the world of like Schenkerian music theory, or gosh, what would be another good example? We've done so many. We've done 26 now. We do concert clubs where we watch like online concerts, or we do film clubs. We watch the new German biopic about Ludwig van Beethoven. We talk about issues in the world of it. We try to hit a kind of a newsy topic, a lighthearted topic, and a more serious topic every week. That's the basic paradigm. And we began every show with a listening game, which we call our prelude segment. And we have about a roster of about 10 different games that we cycle through. And then sometimes we'll do all games episodes. We try to have, even within this tripartite format, we try to be sort of have a freedom with it, and to have a creativity with how we approach our subjects. We do listener feedback, and then at the end of every episode we do a listening recommendation round, which is called our classical mixtape. So that's the Classical Gab Fest. It's aimed at I would say it's, I know that we have musicians who listen, but it's aimed at music lovers of every stripe. So it was sort of, we think of it as like the crowd that would come to a pre-concert lecture is the kind of people who would really like this. It's for the converted. It's not like a get your feet wet, a basics 101, what is classical music. It's for people who already know a little bit and want to know more about the world and about the music.
Yeah, I found it really engaging. I haven't heard all, you said 26 episodes. I haven't heard all 26, but I listened to a few, and I really like the games you play at the beginning.
Yeah, the games are very popular, especially among musicians.
Yeah, I thought about asking you if we could do one today, but then I was overcome with horror and terror as I thought, what if I can't figure out what the excerpt is, or what if I'm, so.
Welcome to every week at the Classical Gab Fest. We live in terror of each other and the challenges that we're setting ourselves. And one time on the All Games episode, I said to the audience, I was like, look, You guys need to understand the what we are subjecting ourselves to every week, because especially we as conductors who are supposed to be like, these omniscient, all-knowing genii of the world of classical music, we don't like really to expose ourselves to the fact that we don't know everything. But of course we don't know everything, and we prove that on a weekly basis. So I understand your reluctance, but at some point we'll have you on the show to play a game with us.
Well, I was listening to a couple episodes and I liked the games, and I said, oh, these are really fun. Like, I think I'll ask him if he wants to do a game when he comes on my show. And then I heard the episode, and I don't remember what exactly the music was, but it was French piano music that was the listening game. And we were trying to decide if something was Ravel or if it was Debussy or if it was somebody else. I forgot who, a Spanish composer. And I was like, why? One of these, they must be pianists or something. Like, why would they do that? But if you're not a pianist, why would you know all the piano music of Ravel? And so that's when I decided I was not going to ask you to play a game with me on this show.
Well, no, I mean, and the fact is, none of us are pianists. I mean, I pretend to be a pianist every once in a while, but we often will choose piano music just to put the others on, just to knock them off their feet a little bit, and also because, like, you get, like, if we're playing a game where we're trying to identify a composer, you get so much information from the orchestration. I mean, that, especially for conductors, like, we just know the soundscapes of these composers so well. So when we play piano music, you're forced to reckon with the notes, the naked musical style, those indications. And because we see these games as, like, I don't know if you ever listened to The Piano Puzzler on NPR. It's this game where there's a composer who sort of disguises a famous pop melody in the guise of a composer, and
I've heard
the point of that show is to talk it out, to educate through this game. It's like edutainment, really, and that's how we see our games too. Is like, we don't want it to just be, we recognize something immediately and we say it, and it's just about how smart we are. The point is to talk through the stylistic elements of these composers, because that's what people are coming to our podcast for. They are classical music lovers who might not know everything or might just want to know more. And so we say that on the show, that, part of the point is just to have some musical conversation. And so when we throw each other off by choosing, say, piano repertoire, it does give us the occasion to just kind of talk about the pure music without the dressings of orchestral color.
Well, you are brave people. I'm fairly confident in my knowledge of the repertoire, especially the orchestral repertoire, maybe not all the chamber music repertoire. But even so, if anyone said, oh, all the symphonies of so-and-so, well, what's this from? I wouldn't want to play that game, just for fear of accidentally, either not knowing or accidentally saying the wrong thing, and then feeling like all my credentials were being attacked. So kudos to you.
Well, it's funny. Some of the games we can play as a team. And so that obviously helps a lot, because we have three people on the show. And so one of them proctors the game and the other two, compete in it. And it's really funny. It's like, if one of us knows the answer, then the teamwork is immediately, like, cast aside, and it's every man for himself. But oftentimes they're collaborative efforts, so we can lean on each other's expertise, and that really helps a lot.
Well, I think my audience is probably mostly conductors. It's not a huge audience, regardless. And maybe there are a few musicians who like to hear conductors talk. I don't know if that's a thing, but the people who are listening to this,
that would be a unique attribute.
Yeah, right. Orchestral musicians who like to hear conductors talk, there are none in the world. But anyway, if anyone is listening to this conversation right now, I think it's a really fun way to test your knowledge of music, to listen to your podcast and play these games in the safety of your own home with nobody watching, because you can listen to music and see if you know the answer, and then listen to you and your teammates sort of talk out your thought process. Even when you're wrong, which I noticed that frequently one or more of you are wrong. But when you talk through the process, I learned a little bit about the style of this composer or that composer just by hearing you talk about it. And then when the answer is revealed, it's I think in the French piano music one, it was actually an American composer, which
That's
was
right.
Lowell Lieberman.
Yeah, that's right.
So then you think like, oh wow, I just learned something about Lowell Lieberman on accident. Yeah, that's a nice,
Sure, right, right.
nice thing to happen. Accidentally learn something about music.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't ask you at the beginning of the show, are you drinking coffee? And if so, what is your morning beverage of choice?
No, I'm a tea drinker, and I drink green tea, and a very specific green tea. This is called Earl Green. So it's a green tea that's flavored in the manner of Earl Grey with oil of bergamot. Okay. This is my morning drink. Coffee, I can't handle it. I mean, I used to, when I was like in college, I love coffee, but
Yeah, is that green tea caffeine free?
No. I mean, green tea has a small amount of caffeine, and that's what I can handle. What about you? What are you drinking?
I'm drinking a double shot of espresso. That's my morning thing. It's I've done it every day for like 20 years. I'm not going to stop anytime soon, I don't think.
Amazing.
And I'm not very adventurous. I talked to some guys the other day, two conductors who have a show called Conductor's Brew. It's a little bit like my show. The point of the show is conductors drinking coffee, and they have a different coffee every time. And that's kind of the part of the show you tune in to hear what coffee they're drinking today. But I'm a creature of habit, and I have one brand, and I do the same double shot at exactly the same way at almost the same time every day, and that's my routine.
Well, yeah, I am also a creature of habit, and I have my exact same cup of tea, every day at the same time and stuff. So, yeah.
I like to, I'm adventurous in other ways, but not with my coffee. With music or food or travel, I like to experience different things, but with coffee, there's that way. It's funny that I say I'm adventurous. I have a feeling my wife and other people who know me would say, no, you're pretty much a creature of habit.
Well, I mean, there's adventure, the way that we normally think about it, like if you go like traversing over the high seas, but then there's also adventures that take place in the theater of the mind. And I think that's where we musicians, I know that you're a composer too, and I think that's where we can be really adventuresome. And I think that these preset daily routines really help with that, because if you know that you can depend every day on doing something at the same time, that does give room for flights of fancy in one's creative or interpretive work, I think.
It could be. I hope I don't say the wrong composer's name, but I think it's Beethoven who had a routine with his coffee as well, and he counted the beans, like it was the same number of beans
every day,
went in the cup every morning. And I don't think of Beethoven as being a creature of habit. He was a wild man, right? He did whatever he wanted, and his routine, I think, changed frequently. Anyone that could move as frequently as he did to different apartments and whatnot, it seems strange that person would then have like a very meticulous OCD coffee habit. But
yes, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Where in the world are you?
I am in Seattle, Washington. I am the conductor of a pretty unique organization. It's called Orchestra Seattle Chamber Singers, and there's usually a slash in there. And the idea is that it's like an oratorio society. I mean, it's a combined orchestra and chorus. And to me, it's like my dream job, quite honestly. I've been in it since 2018. We have a 6-concert main stage season. And I mean, talk about flights of fancy. It's the kind of thing where I can program like a kid in a candy store, because I can mix it up. Like, a concert could be the Britain War Requiem, or, a series of Bach cantatas. Or it could be something like, I mean, one of my favorite concerts that we did was a World War I concert where we started with, actually, and this is something I want to talk to you about. We started with Lily Boulanger, Pour les funérailles d'un soldat, which is chorus and orchestra and baritone soloists. Then I think we did like a string quartet movement by Hindemith, who was a soldier in World War I in the Prussian army. Then we did the left-hand Ravel concerto. And that was the first half of the concert. The second half of the concert was, I think, a choral orchestral piece by Holst called Ode to Death. Then we did a choral a cappella piece called, it was by Sir Charles Hubert Hastings Parry. And then we finished it with La Valse. So, I mean, you know, we had a cappella music, concerto music, choral orchestral music, everything. And that's like par for the course with this group, you know, I mean, and it's a 50-year-old organization, has a history of very innovative, intriguing programming. So, I mean, to be at the helm of that and to be, you know, at the helm of this organization where I'm pushed to create more interesting programming, and it's like nothing is off the table. It is amazing. So that's why I live here and that's what I do.
Sounds wonderful. I'm actually quite jealous that you have that kind of freedom. And since you mentioned Lily Boulanger, you must have seen on Facebook or somewhere that I'm.
Yeah, you're a doctor now, right?
Well, you know what? By the time this episode goes online, yes, not today.
Congratulations! Cheers. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Oh, well.
And
thanks.
So your dissertation. I mean, I actually would have. I kind of wanted to tune in, but I wasn't able to. Your dissertation was comparing editions of two works by Lily Boulanger.
Yeah, I am attending the University of Colorado in Boulder, and our dissertation, the DMA program is a little different from other schools. Instead of doing one giant dissertation, we do a series of small dissertations, which is both good and bad. I almost would rather have focused and just written a big 300-page document about something and really dug in deep. But instead, I did a series of projects about different things, and I got to look into more than one subject. But then it was really hard to like keep the project small and focused. Mm-hmm. But one of my projects was about the various orchestral editions of her last two tone poems, the D'un Soir Triste and Matin de Printemps. And those are the only two pieces she wrote for orchestra alone, with no singers or solo instruments or anything else, which is why I focused on them. But it's funny that you mention it, because I just did my online lectures yesterday. 24 hours ago, I was talking about this, and I said out loud, I chose these pieces because they're purely orchestral, but man, would I like to do some of her choral orchestral works. It's amazing. Find myself in a situation where I can. Well, you're in that situation, my friend.
Yeah, I am in that situation. And in fact, that's what I did. So I used, so as I mentioned, we have a 6-concert season. One of those is Messiah. So that's like unchanging. That's every year. And I love that. I mean, because the orchestra and the chorus, they know it so well. And it's just so much fun. And I do it from the harpsichord, and it's just great. But my first season, I like to have a season-long arc to tie everything together. And for my first season, the season-long arc was the music of Lily Boulanger. So we did one of her pieces on every concert, including the grand masterpiece, her setting of Psalm 130, Du fond de l'abîme, which is just blows your mind. I mean, and the fact that she was 23 or 24 when she wrote it, and then she died, it's like, oh my God. When people ask me the question, who would you like to see like outlive their lifespan? I mean, there's no question. I mean, she would have changed the history of 20th century music.
Absolutely. That's why I chose her and her music. I discovered her 3 or 4 years ago, and I hadn't heard of her before then. So I thought I was onto something like really that no one had heard of. And then as I studied more, I go, oh yeah, people know who she is. She's not that obscure. But she's kind of obscure. She's not a household name for sure. And many professional musicians have never played her music. But I also said that yesterday in my lecture, that of all the tragic young deaths in classical music that we know about, this is one of the most tragic, because I really believe, and I think there's strong reason for us all to believe, that she would have had a major impact on 20th century music. She would have influenced Stravinsky. She would have influenced all of those amazing composers that her sister taught. And playing that game of like, what if, so-and-so hadn't died at that age? That's a pretty fun game to play. But in this case, I think it would have had, and because she's a woman also, I think it would have had major, major impact on the classical music world in the 20th century, and then carried over. And so we can't change history, so it is what it is. She passed away. It's too bad, but her music is remarkable. And anyone who's listening to this who doesn't know, got to check it out.
I wanted to ask you though, so I haven't done D'un Soir Triste, but I did do D'un Matin de Printemps on this series of concerts that I was talking about. And for all of our Boulanger stuff, I used the edition I used is this really sketchy German website called internote.com. Did you include them in your appraisal of different editions, and tell me everything?
They are one of the 4 editions that are sort of available. There may be more that I don't know about, some obscure, or some person made their own edition, but the 4 editions, anyone who cares, are the original Durand edition, which is okay. It's just handwritten and it's quite hard to read. The materials you get from Durand when you rent it are pretty messy and frustrating. And then the next edition is one that was produced by Joanne Falletta and Terry Bown they started working on it in the 80s, and then they wrapped it up in the early 90s. And that's the Women's Philharmonic edition. It's not really used anymore, I don't think. Then Internote, this company you're talking about, they came out with an edition in 2014, at least of the tone poems. I think they have other, I don't know what year, but they've got other of her works. And those are all based on the Durand scores. And I talked to the editor of those scores, and so basically what he did is he took the really messy handwritten Durand scores and he nicely engraved them. And so they look much.
Nicely is an interesting choice of word there, but yeah.
Yeah, they're full of mistakes.
I know, I emailed them many corrections.
Yeah, me too. Well, it's funny because, the edition's okay, but I had to use one because I couldn't get, so the great edition is the Clint Nywig editions that are at the Free Library in Philadelphia, suddenly the name's escaping me, the Fleischer collection, the Fleischer Orchestra collection. And he's made editions of the 2 tone poems, but I don't know about the choral orchestra works. Those are probably pretty hard to come by. So the Internote ones might be the best ones out there, unfortunately. Anyway, when I was talking with the guy from Internote, he said, yeah, we're very proud of these. These are basically the text, yada, yada. So I purchased one of them and I used it. And man, I couldn't find all the mistakes fast enough. They were just, every rehearsal was burdened by, is this supposed to be a tenor clef, or is this transposed correctly? And parts were in the wrong key for the wrong instrument. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is not in an text.
Very slapdash operation.
And then invented some more mistakes. So I really, those scores show promise, but as they are, at least as they were 2 years ago, I wouldn't use them again.
Well, they're just taking advantage of the fact, and so I'll admit, I took advantage of the fact that European copyright laws are different, for music before 1925 at this point. And so now I guess the majority of her work is now public domain here, because a lot of it was published after she died by Nadia. And a lot of it was published in 24. And so, as of last year, that stuff was available at public domain in this country. But because European copyright laws rely on the life of the author plus a certain amount of time, which ours do too, after 1970, whatever, her music has been public domain there for much longer than it has been here. So that's why these people could put together these slapdash editions and sell them, and not just rent them and stuff. So,
and I don't see any problem with that if a person does it and does it well. But just put the thing in the right key. Just make sure that the tenor clef that's in my score is also in the part, because that would be very helpful.
Right. We had so many problems like that. So I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one.
Since you mentioned I'm a composer, and whether you use Finale or Sibelius doesn't really matter. It's kind of hard to put something in the score and then have it not be in the part. I literally don't know how you do that. So when there was a missing clef or a note was different, and I was like, how did they manage to change the note in the part? And I have the correct note in my score, and it was very frustrating, because the lesson I learned from that, and depending on the publisher and the conductor, the composer, and the piece, the lesson I learned is that just studying the score is enough. You have to study the parts too, which is really frustrating.
Yeah. And their understanding of like how to lay out a score is quite poor. Like I don't think that these people are regularly working with scores somehow, because I mean, like, like when there would be a divisi in a section, like say violins, they would just put a bunch of rests. Like if they were then, united into one part, they wouldn't get rid of the other part, or like just double, on a same page, you have to like double the part, like if they're doing the same thing now, and they wouldn't do that. So, I mean, I could show you the pages from my score, which look like an arts and crafts project, just so that I could read this coherently. I'm like whiting out all of this stuff and drawing in things here and there. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I couldn't say that I was overly impressed with their work.
Neither was I. On the other hand, the reason I went with that score was because the other two, the two older versions are in many ways worse. And then the really good edition that you can get for free, it's not free. I think there's a minimal fee, like $25, but you can borrow these pieces from the Fleischer collection, but they're just in such high demand that you have to wait a year or more to get them. So I literally called the Fleischer. I was doing both of the tone poems, by the way. I did the Matin de Printemps in Colorado with the University of Colorado Orchestra, and then I did both of the pieces back to back with my orchestra in Astoria, Queens. That same spring. So that was the spring of 19 when I was really like digging into these pieces. And so I called the Fleischer collection and they said, oh, we can get you doing Soir Triste by April, but that Matin, you're gonna get that like a year and a half from now. So I had no choice. I had to buy the parts from Internote. On the upside, they're quite affordable. So if you don't mind spending all the time to make all the corrections and go through the parts and everything, they're quite cheap. And if you just want to study the music,
essentially, yeah,
right, you get what you pay for. But you could, if a conductor wanted to just become familiar with the pieces, you can get the scores quite cheaply, and you can have all the Louis Blanchet scores with all the mistakes.
Yeah, right. So my impression is that, and I guess that this is corroborated by what you're saying, is that D'un Matin de Printemps is a much more popular piece than D'un Soir Triste.
Yeah, I understand now. It's come to be almost a part of the standard repertoire. It's now a thing that conductors know. It's easy to find recordings and to see live performances on YouTube, for example. I mean, if you just search on YouTube, you'll find quite a few professional orchestras playing it, and youth orchestras and university orchestras. So it's not a secret anymore. D'un Soir Triste is not quite as popular, and I think it's because of the nature of it's dark. It's very dramatic. I love it. I think it's an amazing piece, but it's a little more difficult to program because you have to have it in just the right place. And here's the other thing. I think the Matin de Printemps works very well on its own. It's 5 minutes. It's lively. It's a good opener. It's a good closer for the first half of a concert. You could use it to close a concert as well. It's a little short, but I mean, it's really programmable. And D'un Soir Triste is 10, 11 minutes long. It's quite dark. It ends on a somber note. And so just figuring out where to put that in a program, it's easier to program with the Matin de Printemps. Like it doesn't go as well on its own. I don't know what you'd put before it or what you'd put after it, except.
Oh, I mean, I think that, you could, I mean, it would be a pretty atmospheric concert, but you could do like some Bartok, Nachtmusik kind of stuff, or, you could do a program about the night, Eine kleine Nachtmusik, if you're feeling feisty.
Sure. Well, you probably wouldn't want to open with D'un Soir Triste, and you probably wouldn't close with it. You might close a first half with it, but man, you're going to send the audience to the lobby wanting a drink. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I am so happy I got to meet you, and again, I want to tell anyone who's made it this far into the show that they got to check out Classical Gab Fest because it's really fun, it's really informative, and because you guys do 3 different topics in every show, I found that in every episode, there was something that really captured my attention. Sometimes I liked everything, and sometimes I thought, well, that topic's not terribly interesting to me, but if I just wait a few minutes, there's another topic coming up.
That's right.
So ingenious plan. I know that you copied it, but it's an ingenious format, and I'm so glad I got to meet you and get to know about your show a little bit.
Thanks so much for having me on. This is a real pleasure. It was great chatting.
Yeah, great. Well, maybe we can do it in person sometime. I'd love to get out there and have a coffee at wherever you get your tea outside of the house.
Please.